Hello. Let me know if my audio. This is a bit of a situation this morning. We decided to not leave too many distractions. Not a good day to drive. I stayed an extra night with my family. Boy, oh boy, do we have the best show you're going to see. I'm going to get rid of all of the anxiety. I'm Bankman, Freid, and FTX, and how out of this, and for years at all. Bad audio, Bud says bad audio. Okay, let me see what's up with the bad audio. I don't have much of a backup. So that's my standard mic. Settings and see if I can fix it. Audio input. Now, let me know if that made it. Did last time. I had a similar. The last time I'm recording on iPad. So let me know when you guys. I'll wait for the delay. I'm coming through better now, or not at all. That would suck if the show today's so good. Let me see. Any difference? Can you hear me? Let's see what's up. No change, Leo said. No change, huh? What about now? It's spotty like a loose cable. Yeah, it's these stupid AirPods. They're the worst. They don't work. How about now, guys? If there's yo, hyper Bitcoinization. What's up, man? Hyper Bitcoin better? Is it? I don't have my lavalier because it doesn't actually still choppy. God damn it. Damn it. Okay. Let me do one more thing. Hey, Odex. One more thing here. iPad microphone. I feel like. Does it make a difference without echo cancellation? Does that make a difference? Stereo audio, gain control. It's breaking up a little. Yeah, no, my Wi-Fi should be fine. It's a really strong signal. I tested it many times outside. Better? Okay, let's just go with this. All right, sun is up, as we saw, right? It's stable. The sun is up, right? Bitcoin is still running, guys. We're doing great, right? Let's have our coffee and talk about the news. The coffee's really good, but not as good as today's show. Today's show is much better. So, did anyone have a chance? Did anyone see this? Marin Altman. You guys know who Marin Altman is? She's, kind of pretty, but we're not here to talk about her looks. It's part of her whole ensemble. It's part of her whole shtick. I booked her for a show last year, and the reason I booked her for a show, all good. Okay, great, awesome. Yeah. So the reason I booked her for a show last year is, she was doing horoscopes. If you don't know who Marin Altman is, she's a young woman. And she does horoscope readings around the industry. And at first people were, because I come from that analyst world and all that, and people were like, what are you doing, horoscopes. I remember in the early days of CoinDesk, a guy named Pete Rizzo, who works with Bitcoin Magazine now, and I still work closely with him. He was the editor-in-chief of of CoinDesk in the early days. And if you know the history of all this stuff, when we were first starting CoinDesk, it still was thought of as like an engineering or technical news source. The markets piece wasn't really established. We're talking 2013, 2014. I mean, of course, CoinDesk made its name from having the Bitcoin price index, which caused it to get referred to by mainstream media all the time and grew the thing. So that was a part of it. But the readers and the audience were often engineers, technical cryptographers. Still are, these people still come and read, Bitcoin magazines. Some still read CoinDesk. But those folks started giving the editor-in-chief shit, Pete Rizzo, in those years because we hired a technical analyst, right? Omkar Godboil, who's great, right? If anyone's looking at charts and all that stuff, but all that chart stuff was sort of new to the whole industry, and everyone was more interested in privacy and cryptography and keeping secrets and those kinds of things. Who's stacking? Yeah, TikTok next block. Yeah, exactly, guys. But here's the thing: when people started criticizing Pete for including technical analysis, right? Because again, the technical folks were saying, "Oh, this is not a Wall Street show. What are we doing?" Pete said, "Well, every newspaper has horoscopes, and every newspaper has horoscopes." That's how he answered every one of these folks who was sort of giving us shit for jumping in and covering things from a purely technical analyst, Wall Streety point of view. And so he said, no, don't worry, man. It's just horoscopes, right? We got to have a horoscope section in the newspaper. And I loved that comparison, and I've always used it. And when it came full circle, when people were saying, well, how can we talk about markets in an interesting way? I said, well, the answer is just to get a pure horoscope person. Don't even go to the TA stuff. Just go right to the real source. And, of course, she's better than all the technical analyst people out there. Listen to some of her predictions, right? And she's open about it. She'll just come and say, no, I don't know anything. I'm just going with the moon and the stars, and I figure it's going to work, right? So there was a thing she predicted last year in 2021. Like she pinned a couple days at the start of the year based on the astrological cycles and said, Bitcoiners should look out for that day and that day. And boom, when she hits it right, people go nuts, right? People go nuts. But here's some context that I only really figured out. I didn't put it together. I was actually paying attention to what she's talking about in a second, an eclipse. But I didn't put it together with the FTX stuff, but she did. So here's what happened. If you remember back in June, when the original liquidity crunch in the industry came, and Luna, right? Luna spilled over to Three Arrows, right? So the night Luna collapsed, there was actually a lunar eclipse, and I remember watching it on the farm. I was like, wow, because I could see a lot of the sky from the hill I live on, and I watched the whole thing. I had just gotten back from Texas, where I was down for the CoinDesk show, and there it was, boom, this amazing eclipse, and I watched it, and of course this was when the big drawdown was happening. And Marin at the time warned everyone that these eclipses come in pairs, that they come in cycles. And she announced that in 6 months' time, we're going to have more trouble. Sorry, not 6 months, from June to now, whatever, the November eclipse. So the day of the FTX debacle, she had predicted that would be this lunar eclipse finishing up the story, right? So she nailed it. But she didn't just nail it. She said some pretty interesting things about it. She said back in June, I'm expecting the remnants of this falling house of cards to play out until the next eclipse, which is in early November. And she said at that point, according to her mystical readings, right, she says we're going to be referring to the clarity around events, regulations, and government responses to what we're doing. That was all going to be in I actually saw a bit of the eclipse the morning of it, because I wake up at 4:30 or something every morning, and it was just reaching its apex then. And I was actually looking at her Twitter account, and she said it's the high point of chaos right now because she wasn't able to sleep, and everyone wasn't able to sleep. And of course, she nailed it. 2 eclipses that thumbtack the entire credit issue. Right? And now, once again, remember her prediction that expecting the remnants of this falling house of cards to play out, and this will refer to the clarity around events, regulations, and government responses. So let's test her theory for a second. So remember, she predicted that this eclipse here, right, would lead to clarity around events. Now, if anyone saw the eclipse, this is just a side note coincidence, right? This is not even the point of what I'm going to be talking about today. It was a blood eclipse, a blood red eclipse, right? But it doesn't really paint the moon red. Right? I wouldn't saw it. It kind of looks orange, right? The shadow itself could be thought of as red or whatever, but a lot of orange in that color scheme, right? So right away, the moon that night was orange. I'm whatever, think what you will of it, right? It was orange. They called it a blood moon, but it was really more orange, right? Now, what I want to, you know, I also just want to say one little side note about the moon and eclipses and something maybe you didn't know about, but something that's unreal. If you didn't hear about this or know about this or never put two and two together, right? Did you know, did you know that the moon is exactly 400 times smaller than the sun? Did you know that? It's exactly, not exactly, around 400 times smaller than the sun. But it's also 400 times closer to Earth than the sun. The sun is 400 times further away from planet Earth than the sun. And these proportions, 400 times smaller, 400 times closer, are what leads to the conditions we experience on Earth, which is that the moon and the sun look to be the same size. And eclipses would not be possible unless it was for this relationship. They wouldn't be able to eclipse each other. Now, if you didn't know how much we learned about calculus, how much we learned about the rate of change, because we had this constant to calculate from. If we didn't have pure eclipses, a lot of the cosmos and its mathematical underpinnings would be much more difficult for us to understand. That was kind of like the Rosetta Stone of astrological mathematics, right? That the eclipse is even possible was a major advantage for our insight into the universe. And we created a lot of amazing things out of this coincidence. 400 times closer, 400 times smaller, equals, from a human perspective on Earth, the same size. And therefore became a reference point for us to figure out what rate of change is. Because calculus, of course, is derived from the complex mathematics required to calculate the speed of orbits and all of this stuff, right? So it was all checked and verified by the math that we need to use to understand what's going on in space. And calculus was a result of these conditions. Created by an alchemist, by the way, Newton, who would have been a Bitcoiner, 2 feet first, we know that. So calculus and the moon and all this stuff, right? Important coincidence. But there's other coincidences out there, right? So what I'm saying is we had this lunar eclipse and a bunch of stuff happened, right? But what happened, right? She says we're going to get clarity around regulations and events and all that stuff, right? Well, let's just stop for a second and think about the name of the person caught up in all this trouble, right? Is his name not Bankman Freid? Is that not his name? Is he not the Bankman Freid? Is that what you could, like, I mean, you could call him Freed, but I know other people with the same spelling, and it's sometimes Fried, right? You could read it Fried, right? Did the Bankman get fried? Right? Was he not going on that day to, in the days preceding, right? We've talked about it a lot on this show. Was the Bankman not trying to play footsie with the CFTC and regulators? We talked about it on the show yesterday about the prediction markets and what all that meant. But when I stop and look at the conditions of how we're coming out of this, what regulations, now a lot of people are afraid, right, that this is such a blow up that we're going to get a bunch of crap loaded onto us. That all might be true, right? That all might be true. But nevertheless, the snake in the grass, that is the crypto bro trying to work with regulators to create a regulatory moat to crystallize the exact financial conditions and roles. It's like a play, it's like a show, right? He wanted to crystallize the roles of all participants. Like, the stars of the show are still the Wall Street traders. Wall Street still gets the best and brightest. He's just raising the bar for participation. You need a Series 7 license like him. You need to be a quant trader like him. And you need to run nodes and know which nodes are great and calibrate them and all that stuff. So it's just like another level of complexity added on to the Wall Street shit pile, right? And so Bankman Fried, right, is gone. We don't have to worry about Bankman anymore. Bankman's out of here, right? That's just one coincidence. I also saw another one, right? Yesterday, we had a Fed Reserve Chair, Neil Kashkari, right? Kashkari, or whatever you call this guy. And he came out with a quote, right? This is in lieu of all this crazy shit going on, right? He says, "Our traditional economic models aren't working well right now." That's what he said, right? So, Kashkari said that things aren't working well. Do you guys know what the cash carry trade is? Do you know what the cash and carry trade is? Cash carry, right? The cash and carry trade is when traders, Wall Street people, use the delta between derivatives markets, the 30-year bond, right? All those kinds of things, and the spot market valuation. So the cash carry trade is what has led to this incredible windup of collateral, finance, everything into forex markets, everything into these sovereign debt environments, right? That's all the cash carry trade. It's people betting on the delta between government hopes and dreams and the reality on the ground, right? The cash and carry trade is what every Wall Street nobody has been doing for however many years now, 30 years, and just printing money. It's what's created the bubble. The cash and carry trade is what has created the bubble. And now we've got cash carry telling us that the system doesn't work anymore. Right? Cash carry is telling us the system doesn't work anymore. So Bankman Fried is finished, right? And cash carry says, I don't know what to do. I'm done. Like this is beyond me. Cash carry's out, right? Probably 400 diameter or radius. Dimensions will be bigger in 3D pi and pi cubed. Yeah, I don't know what you're saying, Kevin. All I'm trying to say is that the eclipse is possible because our vantage point on Earth is tricked by the dimensions. That's all I mean. And it was a bigoted advantage. Now, to the extent that it's not precisely true, like I understand that there is a slight difference in the distance from Earth and a slight distance in the size being the exact 400x proportions, but it's around there. I mean, it's really close. Like it's abnormally close, right? So I'm again not trying to make a scientific argument. I am absolutely going with Marin Altman and the horoscope piece here, right? And I'm just pointing out this weird thing, just like I'm doing with Bankman Fried and the cash carry trade, right? The Bankman Fried and the cash carry trade, right? Both of those things. So now, what I want to mention is that delta between hopes and dreams and reality, right? Because that's where we start, right? What do we say? I was just responding to someone else. Oh, sorry, I didn't see that. No way. What does hyper-Bitcoinization mean by no way? Let me check. Anyway, we'll talk about that. I'll come back to your comments in a second. So, yeah, look, I mean, I'm only just mentioning the coincidences, right? Like, I'm not trying to come out and say the moon is fake and man-made, right? Some people say that. I'm not coming out to say it. Some people have said that, right? When they look at this coincidence, right? So take it for what you will, right? What I want to just say is that you've got Bankman Fried, the Bankman's assessment of regs over. The cash carry trade from the Fed, what is he, president? What does he do there? I don't remember. So cash carry, part of the problem, now telling us that he doesn't understand where the world is at, right? Can't count anymore. Now, so we've got the eclipse that painted the moon orange the other day. We've got Bankman Fried, according to the horoscopes, fulfilling Marin Altman's prediction that regulation stuff would be clarified. Right now, what I mean by clarified is a lot of people thought that the Bankman was, sort of with us on our team. A lot of people like myself said he's not on our team. I've been saying it for a long time. And I made the prediction out loud to people 3 weeks ago that I thought he was done. I thought the industry was going to turn on him and stab him and kill him, metaphorically, right, in his business. It sounded insane. I couldn't believe what I was saying. I was saying it to someone of relevance in the industry, and he was like, come on, right? And I was telling him, like, honestly, prepare, because whatever you think you're getting cash flow from these people, whatever you think they're sponsoring, they're not sponsoring it, they're done. Like, whatever they just did, you don't want them as a sponsor, first of all. It's bad signal. and they're just done. I said I can't see a way for them out. Like I can't imagine anyone trying to help Bankman after this, right? Bankman is not on your side. Look at his name. You know, let him tell you who he is. He told us who he was. Many times he told us who he was. You just had to listen. You just had to take his word for it, right? We knew who he was. The political donations, all that stuff, we knew who he was. He was not on our team, right? His name is Bankman. Bankman. And luckily, Bankman's Freid. So, all of this confusion, right? All of this confusion. Wall Street is a mess. Wall Street's a mess. And it always was supposed to be a mess. Remember, Bitcoiners didn't come in to change Wall Street. We came to destroy Wall Street and change money. They're not the same thing. They're not the same thing, right? Wall Street was perverted by the bad money. It created more Wall Street, right? We came to destroy Wall Street, not to crystallize it, not to say the best and brightest continue in financial engineering. Wrong. We want the best and brightest to make cool stuff again that has cash flow and they can sell and they become masters because they're good at it, right? We want to increase people's appetite for quality things. We want to increase people's desire to train themselves to get good at mastering things to make them, right? We do not want more financial engineers. And as everyone was predicted, this is a normal thing. It's not the financial engineers' fault, right? I went to all these fancy schools and saw where the best and brightest were going. They weren't going because into finance and into Wall Street because they loved it. The best and brightest go where the most money is available, right? You know, you look at athletes. Why do you think people play basketball? It's a fun game, but it's also the highest paid individual sport in America if you're an individual basketball player. The league itself is not the richest, right? Baseball is the richest league in American sports, but that's just because they play a lot of games and it's a long season. But there's 50 people on a team, 44-man roster plus others, so they got to split the money up a lot. Basketball's 5 people, right? So it's 5 people on a team, and each of them makes a lot of money. And you see, how many great athletes play basketball. LeBron James could have been a professional athlete in any sport he felt like. I mean, do you think anyone can stop LeBron James as a receiver in football? I mean, he could do whatever he felt like. Be it risk his injury, it's not as gentle, let's say. It's not as easy on the body. Not that basketball's easy on the body at all. I'm sure LeBron James is going to have a price to pay as he gets older, but I'm sure it's worth it. He looks like he's still in great shape and all these things. But, LeBron James played basketball. It was the most money, the most prestige, all those things. And so just multiply that by 1 million, because there's 1 million spots in Wall Street for people like this, and you can imagine where all the best and brightest have gone. Right? They're not making furniture. They're not farming. Right? There's no best and brightest who went and became a farmer, right? But Bitcoiners want that, right? I'm not alone, right? Bitcoiners want an economy that looks more like the productive economies we want to get back to, that aren't just filled with financial engineering and filled with that kind of obfuscation. So where does that leave us, right? Well, here's the third part of my scenario. All this confusion in Wall Street and all of this certainty about their own position has created a really interesting dynamic, right? And it's the following, that the petrodollar, right, energy for dollars, right, which is the benchmark of everything in the world, right? Everything is benchmarked on dollars because dollars are a benchmark for conceivably the potential and capacity for oil extraction and energy and all of these things, right? That's how this stuff is calculated. It's like a bit of the real estate, but really the energy matrix of your country, employment, GDP, blah, blah, they all factor into the poker game. They're all cards in it. But the most powerful card, the aces, are your country's energy policies, generally your country's access to oil, right? So Canada, for example, can make 1 million stupid mistakes in the world. They don't have to get much right? They can just sit around and say, well, they got a lot of oil. The one mistake they can make is not getting it out of their country, which is what they're living with now, and which is why they get punished, right? Financially, why the dollar in Canada's having trouble, just simply because their output of oil is below expectations, below what it could be, below its potential, and relatively low compared to the United States. But its meaning is only derived from its relative activity compared to the United States, right? And the dollar and West Texas crude and that price and those oil prices, etc. So But with this BRICS thing, right? So that's the U.S. system, that's the petrodollar, right? That's putting pressure. With this BRICS thing, so what is BRICS? BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and I forget what the S is, but more people are joining, right? Saudi joined, right? As a big blow to the petrodollar because that takes OPEC and its effects on the West Texas price and U.S. benchmark out of the game a little bit. And what it ends up doing is it pushes more pressure on people's psychology, right? The benchmarks are changing. The relative understanding of the entire economy now has been put in the hands of the CIA with their operations being, and when I say put in the hands of the CIA, they're not actually making decisions for the economy. They're making decisions for themselves that have effects on the economy that they're not necessarily taking into account, right? So when you say, let's go into Russia and stop or Ukraine and stop Russia, sure, sure, fine. I get why you want to do that. No, I'm not arguing against that now. I'm not arguing against that now. What I'm saying is that priority created a result where other countries like India, who still is not a huge importer of Russian oil or anything like that, right? This is a minuscule amount, so I don't want to gang up on India for not sticking with American military principles, and I don't want to count on India just being independent as part of my projections here. What I'm saying is India could just as well go back to America's bosom when it comes to energy in order to get stuff, right? So I'm not saying we got to count on India as BRICS in order for this whole scheme to work. All I'm saying is they've created an alternative market for oil so that the monopoly of oil for dollars is broken. And there are now two systems. There's something else, BRICS, they haven't created the currency yet, but I can't imagine they're all going to rush back to the dollar no matter what, right? We saw what happened to Russia's gold reserves and foreign reserves, and I don't think China wants to play that game. I think China is very happy now that there is a forming market for renminbi, Japanese or Chinese money, and oil. That's great for them. They want to be a reserve currency, right? They want to grow, which they're free to do. Especially now, the United States created an avenue for this all. They created a psychological space for it to happen. But this psychological space that they created to happen actually puts people in a vice. People around the world in a vice. Puts markets in a vice. Right? Because there's no more consistent reference point, it's going to be a political choice. What's your reference point? Right? So more than ever, the economy is moving into a political realm. More than ever, the economy is moving into a political realm. And from that, you end up like Kashkari and Bankman Freid, and the politics of things are coming over top of the supposed fictitious, but let's pretend for a second, independent nature of the Federal Reserve. But the truth about the Federal Reserve is they were their own entity in that they didn't have to listen to government, right? Policy objectives were not their concern. And they could be blind about it, right? We have justice is blind, right? And to a certain extent, we allowed the Fed Reserve to continue on with that separation of powers, blind, right? Politics are the one that's not supposed to be blind, right? They're the ones looking and trying to change things and make things better and for whatever people, right? But justice was blind, and conceivably, the banking system, the Fed Reserve system, was blind. But it's no longer blind. And it's no longer blind because we're seeing before our eyes that policy objectives are coming over top of what they're doing. And we can see it right away in America when you've got the demand destruction going on, the increase of interest rates, and fighting inflation, while simultaneously the politicians don't want to live in that world and are giving gas stimmy checks and basically fighting the Fed, right? When they tell all these people, don't fight the Fed, it's true, unless you're the government. Because if you're the government and you have these relationships, you can sort of explain it all away, right? So we got Kashkari, but we've also got Jerome Powell, right? We've also got Jerome Powell, right? Who isn't necessarily on board with all this stuff, but let's just look at his name for a second, right? We've got Jerome Powell, who is the same name, right? The same abbreviation of a guy I used to work for. And people call him the same thing, right? That's Jesse Powell. Right? People call Jesse Powell J. Powell. he's called Jay Powell the same way. So Jesse Powell and Jay Powell. So Jesse Powell quit Kraken, his job as CEO, the same day that Jay Powell had a big interest announcement, the first 75 basis points announcement a few weeks ago. And Jesse stepped down as CEO. I worked for Jesse. Jesse came out and gave an amazing Twitter thread today where he talked about our industry, the good people in it. And I advised Jesse directly when FTX came on the scene about what they were doing, what was going on, and how crazy the whole thing looked to me. And Jesse always listened, always had time, and was never in a rush to keep up with all these folks that were building new things and getting all kinds of attention, right? Because a lot of people pressured him to follow, right? Why don't you do like BlockFi and give collateralized lending? I did the math on it. I said, until we get the bank license, until we get the Fed funds discount window, this isn't going to make money. There's no way BlockFi was getting cheaper US dollars than we were. And there was no way that they were able to afford the yield without dipping into investor funds in order to distribute it, which we knew was happening, right? We knew all of these people. I looked into every single one of them. FTX as well, right? And I said, there's no way. I said, Coinbase can do it because they did their big public offering. And I said, that's probably where they got the cash from. If you remember in 2021, they had a $100 billion IPO. And I said, well, that's one way to get cash to do it, right? Better than a few small investors writing $50 million, $100 million checks. You're getting a public market. There's stock out there. You can raise money. You can pay yield and use it for growth, right? This is a very honest strategy. So that one I understood. The other ones I couldn't get my mind around, and Jesse was great. So Jesse goes on and says, this industry is made up of great people, and if we stick to first principles, we're going to make it. He does bring up an interesting point, which is that U.S. lawmakers have accountability in this, and he's right about that, right? The amount of pretzel contortions we had to do at Kraken just to not fall afoul of U.S. laws, and still got our hands tapped all the time. You leave New York State saying we don't want to live with BitLicense, but they chase you down anyway, right? That happened. We left and said we don't want to deal with New York State. It didn't matter. They came after Jesse anyway. So Jay Powell now is dealing with. Let me just finish on Jesse Powell. So he says that the U.S. lawmakers have accountability. They've created these conditions. They've forced us all out into the streets and all these things, right? Into foreign countries, into the Bahamas, because there's no framework here. So right away, I think, especially now we've got Elizabeth Warren saying she's going to come after our industry and all these things, right? She's the least credible person in D.C. and don't think she has any power over what it is we're doing. That's just my opinion. I think she's going to help us in the end, because what we're going to see is we're going through something that the whole world is about to have to go through anyway. We're just a bit ahead, right? We're seeing our system fall apart because of what happened with the blatant misuse of collateral, the blatant misuse of depositor funds. But remember, in the normie world, what the Bankman Freid did is totally normal. All these banks take depositor funds and invest in stuff. The whole system is built that way. The whole thing, right? So while one of us in our system collapsed for doing the normal thing and for trying to make our system like the normal world, the normie world, right? The normie Wall Street world, it all blew up. So Jerome Powell is about to manage a system that is on life support, right? He's got to inject capital every day to keep it alive. And he's going to have to inject more capital because inflation isn't going to stop as long as energy prices stay high and as long as the U.S. federal government is interested in the political aspects of all of this, keeping consumption high in certain ways, and basically fighting the Fed, right? So there is a fight going on about the subjugation of the Fed, yes or no, right? Subjugation of the Fed to policymakers, yes or no. There's a fight going on before our eyes, right? It's obvious, right? And what does this mean? Well, Jesse Powell predicted, right, on his end, that if we stay to first principles in the industry, which is simple banking based on proof of work, based on networks that are functional, there's a way out of this, right? There's a way out of this. He believes it sets us back a few years. I don't think it does, right? but time will tell. But what I hear is that the J. Powell, right, Jerome Powell, Jesse Powell, talking about jewels and proof of work, right? Talking, their names are literally jewels, proof of work, J. Powell. With this psychological breaking of energy markets, petrodollar, BRICS, a new reference point for the actual market cost of energy is required, right? It's required. And the Federal Reserve can no longer provide the psychological benchmark. The dollar can't be the benchmark anymore because it's becoming political money more and more. It's becoming political money more and more, right? Which is probably the right thing to do. Like if they want to keep the consumption thing going on with the dollar, I'm all for it, right? I'm all for stimmy checks in dollars. Keep going, keep giving it to people. We can't let people die because of Wall Street screw-ups. So they got to fix it, right? So they've got to give them policy credits to consume things, right? That's the only way forward. But if Jerome Powell wants to preserve American economic supremacy, his only choice is to change how the Fed Reserve creates the benchmark for oil and for relative economic growth around the world. And there's really only one option for him, right? If Bitcoin continues to inculcate and get into American energy matrices, politics, infrastructure, if we buy nuclear reactors, right, we can change it from petrodollar to actual joules, actual energy output and proof of work. Right? We can change it to those things. And if we do that, it doesn't matter who's hodling Bitcoin, it doesn't matter who's buying coffee with it. If just the reference for energy, the cost of energy around the world is in Bitcoin, just the reference, just the psychological benchmarking of energy done in Bitcoin will allow hyper-Bitcoinization to come into place. It's just the measurement that matters, right? Now, all the other stuff can come after. People saving, people spending, all that stuff can come after, right? But if between now and, let's say, a year from now, right, people are starting to benchmark because they can't benchmark in anything else. It doesn't make sense. All the research gets thrown out. It's all garbage. Da, da, da. If you start benchmarking Bitcoin and energy, we're in hyper-Bitcoinization and we are in the moon. Right? We made it to the moon. And that orange moon that appeared 2 nights ago, as this was all going on, right, can foretell, I think, the way things are headed. So I was also asked, where did I put it? Dang, where's my phone? Oh, here it is. So let's just do, I wanted to do a horoscope, right, because Hyper-Bitcoinization podcast asked me to do the I-Ching, because we talked about I-Ching yesterday and the prediction machine and what it would do. So I did it. I did it just before, so it's live just before. And this is what I got. So here's the question I asked it. Right? Here's the question that I asked it. The question I asked it was, can you give a short-term outlook for Bitcoiners between now and the Bitcoin Magazine conference, Bitcoin 2023, in Miami in May? The reason I choose May is because Marin Altman said the next eclipse is just before our event in May. So I wanted to do the next eclipse season, right? I wanted to see what's happening inter-eclipse. And what did it say to me? What did the I-Ching say to me? First of all, it gave an amazing, normally you get the 6 and you have to put them together. Sometimes when you do the 6, it can morph, I don't understand how, mathematically into one symbol, right? So I got the magic one symbol, which was the 0, right? I got the 0. It's not really a 0, but it's that one, right? It's the straight line, 4 broken lines, 1 straight line. And what that denotes is hunger, it says, right? It's hunger. Doesn't look good at first, right? Hunger, what the hell? 0 and hunger. But here's what it actually says, and this is why it actually fits, you know? Hunger. Persistence brings good fortune. Examine the hunger spontaneously, seeking to fill the mouth. Being hungry for something, having a desire or need. Things go well by preserving. It is good to examine what one spontaneously seeks to satisfy the desire. What is the actual desire? Does what you try to satisfy your desire with actually satisfy your desire? And that's really what we're talking about here in the end, right? Remember we read the Fight Club quote the other day that we're in a spiritual war. We're fighting against literally the emptiness inside your soul created by the petrodollar and consumption society and fiat currency. That's the point of what we're doing here. This thing of, and again, we talked about not ever fat shaming. We're not into that, right? But I always said that Sam Bankman-Fried physically was an awful representation of what our industry is. Because, look, this is a needy dude, right? It's just obvious. Like, I don't want to diagnose someone from afar, but pulling out all these politicians all the time, the CFTC commissioners, doing like groupie photos with Democrat politicians. I mean, it's gross. It's really gross, right? Especially when, you know, just the look. It's no good. It was terrible, right? I've always been, you know, an Arthur Hayes fan. Not because he does all kinds of crazy stuff, right? But just as far as being the best writer in the space. I mean, have you guys ever read Arthur Hayes' stuff? And the physical fitness. Like, he's healthy. He takes care of himself, right? This has always been a thing that Bitcoiners have to embrace, right? The eating well, not being a conspicuous consumer, having low time preference, wanting better things, not having a spiritual void in your heart, right? Being actually satiated by saving money, providing for your family, and getting better at whatever it is that you do. You know, it's like the old Abraham Lincoln saying, you know, whatever you do, whatever you are, be a good one. Something like that, right? Whatever you are, be a good one. And that's the name of the game here, right? That's the name of the game. So there you go. You know? I think in no time, jewels and proof of work mining are going to be the only reference we have for the economy. They're the only way we're going to psychologically be able to make sense of any of this craziness. That's it. There's only one way, right? The dollar cannot be a benchmark anymore. It's exhausted, psychologically spent, as Kashkari told us. Right? What do we say? Ask a question first. Yeah, good. Yeah, no changing lines. Just the one. Yeah, no way, dude. Hodlers are hungry. Yeah, hodlers are hungry. Yeah, haha. Perfect, isn't it? Isn't it? Yeah, the perfect hexagram. Yeah, that's what I got. I mean, I can show you here. Like, I took the screenshot. There it is, guys. I wanted to read off of that. Hunger, one character. Normally you get the full character and it comes with a bunch of stuff and you kind of have to put it together. First shot, that's what I got. All right, hunger. And I read it to you. I don't know. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing stuff, huh? So that's what we got, guys. You know, that's what we got. I think the next Bitcoin Miami show is going to be lit. We got another eclipse coming. We already had the orange moon. It was an orange moon. The blood moon is orange. Blood orange, right? We'll remember it, see what happens. Yeah, that's all I'm asking for. That's all I'm asking for, right? I want to see Jules' proof of work as the benchmark for the economy. JPOW and JPOW yesterday both said that's what they hope to see. Right, in their own ways, and Kashkari's done, Bankman Freid is done, the BRICS thing, who cares, right? We're going to beat them all. All right, team. See ya. Have a good day. Peace. Even the moon gets all the Bitcoin, yeah. See ya, bud.